What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in this video today, we are going to be discussing something I've never really talked about on this channel before, and that is a category of investment called alternative investments. This is something that has been around for a very long time, but recently has grown in popularity due to current market sentiment and current market conditions. And essentially what alternative investments come down to is the fact that there's other asset classes out there other than things like stocks, bonds, fixed income, and cash. There's a lot of different things that people buy with their money as assets with the idea of earning money through capital appreciation or having that asset go up in value over time. So it's no surprise, guys, that in 2020, we saw record high amounts of stimulus money entering our economy. We saw record high participation in the stock market. And as a result, we have seen indexes in the stock market at or near all-time highs yet again. So many people are looking to diversify outside of traditional investments like stocks and bonds and look for less popular but maybe more interesting investments, and that is where alternative investments come in. So there's pretty much two different reasons why people seek out alternative investments. The first one is for diversification or less correlation with the overall market, because what you may notice with a lot of assets out there is that they tend to correlate pretty closely with the overall stock market. And one of the core reasons for diversification is to make sure that your money is doing different things at different times. So one of the goals people have as they are investing more and more money is to not only have, lots of different stocks, but they also may choose to add other investments and assets to their overall portfolio. So this has personally been a big goal of mine in late 2020 as well as early 2021, which has been diversifying outside of just your traditional stock investments and getting into more alternative investments that simply have less attention on them. And in addition, another reason people are seeking out alternative investments is that some of these asset classes are actually outperforming the stock market. So if you are looking to diversify and potentially look for different areas to invest in, and there is the potential for higher returns, you may be somebody who is interested in alternative investments. Now, just to cover a couple of examples here for you guys, traditional investments are things like blue chip stocks or fixed income investments, CDs, and things like that. And when we're talking about alternative investments, this is a wide scope of assets. But to name a few popular ones, there is farmland, there is also intellectual property, there's venture capital / angel investments, which is actually something I've been focusing on quite a bit myself. And then another example of this is fine wine or other collectibles. So as mentioned, guys, I've been seeking out alternative investments myself, and this put me in contact with a person named Scott Lynn. He is the CEO and founder of an alternative investment platform known as Masterworks. And this is a very interesting platform that allows you to buy shares of precious artwork from some of the greatest artists of our time, such as Picasso. I would also like to thank Masterworks for sponsoring this video, and I'm going to be doing a full interview here with Scott shortly. And don't worry, guys, this is not some kind of sales pitch or anything like that. I am simply here to educate you on some different investment avenues that exist outside of your traditional avenues like the stock market. That being said, I just want to make these disclaimers here that I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I don't currently have any investments with Masterworks myself. However, I will be considering that for future investments. And lastly, guys, I'm not saying that I recommend Masterworks, but it is an option that you may want to consider after doing your own research and due diligence above and beyond the scope of this video. That being said, guys, let's jump into the interview now and talk with Scott about alternative investments and Masterworks. Hey everybody, we have Scott here on the call from Masterworks. Scott, thanks so much for making the time here. Really excited to talk to you. Are you guys located in New York City, or what city am I seeing behind you there?
Yeah, we are in New York, as you can tell.
Very nice.
Pretty quiet right now.
Yeah, I know. I'm in upstate New York myself, and so yeah, it's been quiet. I've been down to the city, but it's not the normal city we're used to, you know?
It's definitely not the normal city we're used to. I'm finding difficulty on what I'm going to do this weekend.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I hear you there. I'm mostly just doing work myself, just to not really much other options. But I'm really excited to have you on the channel here. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is what is Masterworks for somebody who's never heard of this platform before as a viewer of this video?
Yeah, so Masterworks is the first platform that allows anyone to purchase shares in great works of art. So just like you would purchase shares in a public company, you can purchase shares in a Basquiat, a Monet, a Picasso, and so on. So we're really the first platform to securitize art as an asset class and make it investable by anyone.
Very interesting. I'm actually somebody with zero artistic ability myself. I learned that in high school. So artwork is something that I'm totally unfamiliar with. But when we're talking about potential investment opportunities, that's always something that sort of piques my attention. So if it's okay with you, what I want to talk about first is just the art market in general, because I'm completely new to this space and I don't really know much about it. So I kind of want to hear more about artwork in general and this potential, something for a way to make a return on your investment through artwork.
Yeah, so the art market's a massive market. So most people don't appreciate that the art market sells roughly $60 billion a year in art. It's a $1.7 trillion asset class. So it's one of the largest asset classes that most people like yourself are not that familiar with. I try to compare art to other asset classes that people know more about. So if you think about art at $1.7 trillion, then you think about venture private equity at $3.5 trillion, it's literally half the size of venture private equity, but most people aren't familiar. And one of the reasons they're not familiar is because there's not an easy way to invest in art today. So unlike venture private equity, there's, I think, 6,000 venture funds now that help people allocate to the asset class. But up until Masterworks, the only way you can allocate is if you actually have millions of dollars to buy a painting. So the price barrier alone makes it not that accessible to most people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was when I was doing research on the platform, it's really interesting how essentially people are buying shares of masterpieces, right? Like Picasso's and different paintings. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works. So you come to masterworks.io, you create an account, and you basically purchase shares in an individual painting like a Basquiat or a Picasso or a Monet. And then we just recently launched trading markets as well. So people are now trading shares in these individual artworks.
Very interesting, yes. And I think a question a lot of people are going to have, especially on my channel, because we talk about dividend stocks, a lot of traditional investments. With a dividend stock, it's very clear how you have cash flow from that investment through your quarterly dividends, but how exactly does an investor make money by owning artwork? Is it strictly just asset appreciation?
Yeah, it's strictly capital appreciation, which is not dissimilar to gold. A lot of people make comparisons between gold and art, but it's interesting because if you look at a lot of these individual artist markets, there's artists like Monet that appreciate kind of in high single digits, 7, 8, 9% a year. But there's also artists like Basquiat or like Banksy that are appreciating between 15 and 20% a year. And then some very emerging artists like Ford, you probably never heard of, Chris Wool, et cetera, who are appreciating above 25% a year. So depending on the segment of the art market that you focus on, there's really interesting returns.
Very good there. I understand. That's interesting. Now, I've been doing a lot of research on alternative investments myself just because I started off as majority, a stock channel and a stock investor. But with all of the craziness going on in the stock market this year, I mean, it's been a wild year, and I've kind of been taking steps backward and kind of looking at other places I can put my money into just because I have a lot in stocks. Markets are back to all-time highs. But I think a lot of people are wondering, how does artwork compare to stocks and bonds in terms of volatility or liquidity? Because I think those are the two areas that these assets are just totally different.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it depends on what segment of the art market you focus on. So we tend to focus on what's referred to as contemporary art, or art created after World War II. And if you look at contemporary art generally, that's appreciated at roughly 13% over the past 20 years. So that's a really really high bar. I think the S&P over the past 20 years is somewhere around 8 or 9% at this point in time, maybe
Sure.
approaching 10% now that markets are at an all-time high. So it is an outperforming asset class. In terms of volatility, we tend to look at what we refer to as loss rates and then magnitude of loss. So how often does someone lose money in the art market? And then when they do lose money, how much money do they lose? And what we find is that loss rates and magnitude of loss tend to be less than gold, they're less than real estate, they're less than public equities. So we think it's this really interesting risk-adjusted asset class that really deserves a role in any portfolio.
Now, I was also going to ask you too, is this platform for accredited investors only?
It's a good question. So these are all technically SEC qualified offerings. So every single painting that we buy, we take public through a similar process as like Uber going public. So anyone can purchase shares, retail investors as well as accredited investors.
And what is the minimum for getting started? And do you have a set fee structure for Masterworks?
Yeah, so our fees are very similar to hedge fund. They're 1.5% a year plus 20% of profit when the painting sells. The minimums really depend on the investors. So as soon as you sign up for Masterworks, you can schedule a call with our membership team that talks to you about the art market, talks to you about your portfolio, makes recommendations around allocation, and then what they think the right minimum is based on your portfolio size.
Understood. So this is really kind of a more personalized experience. Is that what I'm gathering here? Like where you're talking to people one-on-one?
It definitely is. And I think we're unique from that perspective. I mean, we prefer to talk on the phone to all of our investors. And I think part of that is just, it's a new asset class for most people. They don't understand it. They don't know how to think about it. So we like to take a more bespoke approach to onboarding people.
And I also applaud you for that because I can just say from hearing from my viewers, one of the common complaints is that a lot of these new investing platforms are not making good investments in customer service. So you have many days that could go by before you're able to get a hold of someone with these burning questions. So that sounds really cool that you guys are doing that. Do you have any statistics on like the average investment on your platform for users?
It really depends on the size of an investor. I mean, we have investors who are investing $500, $1,000. We have investors who are investing $500,000. It really depends on the individual. I would say the average investment is moving up over time. Like we're seeing more and more sophisticated investors come to the platform and allocate to the asset class, particularly in this world where everyone's concerned with the amount of money that the Fed is printing, that
Right.
inflation is coming. So I think we've seen a lot of activity just based on investors concerned about that dynamic.
Right.
So it depends, but I mean we're probably now in the mid-single digit thousands, approaching $10,000 plus for the average investor.
Yeah, I think a lot of investors feel what I'm feeling as well, which is just a level of uneasiness surrounding the stock market where I still see it as a good long-term investment, but in the short term, I can't help but feeling that we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves based on the current, economy and the way everything is going.
Yeah.
On that topic, sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting. I mean, I felt like that personally for 7 years.
Right, yeah.
So, at this point, I don't even know what to think.
What did you do before this?
So I've been starting technology companies my whole career. So I think Masterworks is my seventh or eighth company now. I've also been collecting art throughout that time. So I have a top 100 art collection, art in my home, like you see behind me. So yeah, I mean, I've taken this passion of sort of starting technology companies and also collecting art and created a company, which I think is interesting, right? Like I think anyone should have the ability to purchase shares in these great paintings. You shouldn't have to have $10 million to buy a Basquiat.
Right. And I also I love the way that it's making this more of a free and open environment, and it allows people to have options outside of just stocks and bonds. And that's why, as a space in general, I really like alternative investments because there's a lot of different things you can put your money into. And if you're worried about stocks and bonds and traditional, real estate investments, there's other markets to participate with. But that being said, I want to specifically talk about two things here. Because in 2008 and 2009, we know what happened with the stock market. We saw the Great Recession, and we also just saw, a similar, not as big of a crash, but a crash that occurred here, or correction in 2020. What did you see in the art market during those two time periods?
So we were actually the first research team to do a correlation study on art as an asset class, and correlation just broadly means, if art, what is the when you ask the question around correlation, like what is the correlation factor between art and public equities? That just means if public equities go up, does art go up as well? Does it go up half as much? Does it trend in the opposite direction? And what we found, and this is probably, I think our first report we released with Citigroup a year and a half ago, was that art basically was uncorrelated, right? Like our thesis on art is that it's like buying a call option on the ultra wealthy. Like the wealthier the top 1% gets, the more our prices go up. So we published this report, and then, as you mentioned, COVID happened, and everything collapsed. And we were curious to see if the art market would actually follow that after all this research we've done. And what we found was that during COVID, not surprisingly, art prices continued to rise.
Wow.
And that's really because the top 1%, for better or for worse, wasn't as impacted as the rest of the world.
Could you explain what you mean by that about the top 1%? Is that like the average customer for artwork, or what do you mean by when you say that?
Yeah, when I say the top 1%, I'm just referring generally to the top 1% wealthiest individuals living around the world. And art is a global asset class, right? Like I can buy a $10 million Basquiat out of New York, and I can put it on a plane and fly to Hong Kong and sell it. So when we think about the art market, we really do think globally.
Very interesting. And how because with the stock market, it's very easy to understand, bid and ask prices on artwork. How do you even come up with pricing for like a unique one-of-a-kind painting?
Yeah, so the art market, a lot of people don't understand this, but it's one of the largest data sets on any asset class there is. So out of the $60 billion that sells every single year in the art market, half of that, very, very roughly, is through public auction. So you have a lot of public data on all these transactions, pretty similar to real estate. So you can look at public data to try to understand if you have a particular Basquiat painted in 1981 that's of a similar type or similar imagery, et cetera. Like what are comparable paintings that have sold, and you can estimate value that way.
Gotcha, understood. That's very interesting. And then another question I had for you as well. A lot of people have bought stocks before or something where they lose a ton of money on it. Have you ever taken a loss on a painting through the Masterworks platform?
I mean, everything that, today, realized returns are very positive. We do have trading markets where people now are also trading shares in individual paintings. So just like you trade shares in companies, you can come to the Masterworks website and trade shares in paintings. So I can't comment on, there's been thousands and thousands of transactions on that platform, but generally speaking, all of the assets that we bought and brought to investors, we feel really, really good about.
And do you know right now how many offerings you have currently if someone was just to jump on and take a look?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're doing, 2 to 3 paintings, maybe 4 paintings a month now. So almost one a week, between $1 and $10 million in size. I think we're on our nearly 40th, maybe low 40s total number of offerings.
And then do you completely have a deal subscribed before you move on to the next one? Or are people able to pick and choose which one they want to invest in?
Yeah, they do sometimes run in parallel. Like right now, I think we have 2 or 3 offerings live. It's usually like that. I mean, most of our $1 million paintings will sell out in 24 or 48 hours.
Wow.
Our $10 million paintings will sell out in 30, 45 days. So it really depends on the artwork.
Now, do you or does Masterworks take any stake in the, do you have your own investment in any of these paintings, or does Masterworks?
Yeah, so all of our fees are 1.5% per year, and our 20% of profit when the painting sells are all earned in equity. So we don't take cash-based fees. So we're totally aligned from an investor perspective that way.
Understood. Got you. And so then from an investor's perspective, let's say somebody's watching this and this sounds interesting to them, but they're like me, they don't know the first thing about paintings. Do I need to go out there and become an expert on paintings to take advantage of this platform if I saw this as an opportunity I wanted to pursue?
Yeah, so we really package individual artworks very similar to any other financial product you would look at. So when you look at a painting on the Masterworks platform, you see its historical appreciation rate based on other comparable paintings that have sold publicly. You see lots of other data on the painting, like the appraisal, third-party appraisal on the painting, the offering size. We give you qualitative information, what we refer to as our investment thesis on each painting. So pretty quickly you can read that information and decide whether or not you want to invest.
Understood. Great. And then also, are there educational resources on your site as well? Like if someone's maybe just kind of curious about this, they're not sure if they want to invest, but they just want to learn more?
Yeah, so we've taken it was a huge amount of effort to create what we call a price database, which we make available publicly on our website. And it's a very cool tool where anyone can go to the website and you can search by an artist's name and you can see every single painting that we've identified that has been bought for a certain price and then later sold for a certain price and what the return was on an individual object. So we now have something like 100,000 artworks that we've tracked over time that have been bought and then later sold, and how much those individual collectors made or lost on those transactions. So it's a really cool way to go to the website, choose the artist name Picasso, and see 100 Picassos that have been bought and sold and what people made or lost.
Sure thing, yeah. And then what is your due diligence process like? Is there like a certain percentage of paintings that make it through? Or how do you like determine what pieces of artwork actually end up as an offering?
Yeah, our investment process, I tell people to think about two different steps. One is our research team, which is analyzing data in the art market and deciding which individual artists we think are most investable, usually on an annualized basis, maybe a little bit more frequently. This year, for example, I think we have 40 or 45 different artists that we're focused on. After we determine which artists to focus on, we then go out and our acquisitions team finds as many paintings as they can by those individual artists. So I think out of those 40, 45 artists we have, I was just on a call right before this and looked up this number. We have 2,100 individual artworks by those 40 or 45 artists that have been offered to us. So today we're buying less than 1% of what we see. So we're being very selective about what comes to the platform.
Sure thing. And where do those paintings go when somebody owns shares of them? Are they in a vault somewhere, or how do you store those?
Yeah, I mean, in a COVID world, they're in a vault. I mean,
Yeah.
ideally, we're working with artists and their foundations to decide where they'd like those paintings to be displayed. We'd much rather loan them out to institutions and have them sit in storage. But in today's world,
Yeah, it makes sense. You do what you have to do. And then what about insurance? I don't know how that worked, but let's say, for example, you have a piece of artwork on loan and it gets damaged in that process. Is there any insurance protecting that artwork when it's being transported or anything like that?
Yeah, we have a policy through Lloyd's of London that insures the whole collection. So in the event that something happened, investors would receive that insured value back.
That's great. I think that always helps people to make feel more confident there. And then can you also just walk me through like typical holding periods here, and then just how would I get paid? Like, let's say I'm an investor, I buy a couple of shares of a painting. How do I eventually get that back into US dollars and cash out on my investment? And about how long should I expect to hold on to my shares?
So in general, we tell people to think about a 7-year time horizon. And you should be comfortable with holding that investment for a longer period of time. We do have trading markets now, so a lot of people after IPO are selling their shares in the trading markets. But generally, we tell people to think of these as 7-year illiquid holds. And then if, I guess an example to answer your question, like if we buy a painting for $5 million and we later sell it for $10 million, at the time that we sell it, we would just distribute that additional $5 million in proceeds to shareholders based on their pro rata ownership.
So basically what you're saying is you buy a piece of artwork, the investors collectively all buy shares of that painting, and the ultimate goal is to eventually sell that piece of artwork to one of those top 1% that you were talking about, the customer for like purchasing the whole painting?
Yeah, so we would sell the painting back into the art market to a collector, either privately or through auction at Christie's or Sotheby's.
Is there any particular reason why the top 1% is so interested in artwork? Is there like any tax loopholes or advantages or anything they're following? Or is it just more of a curiosity thing and they like looking at them?
I mean, I think if you look at sort of the top 1%, I mean, art's been collected by the wealthiest families around the world for literally centuries. Like I give this stat to a lot of people that I think don't appreciate it, but Sotheby's just recently went private. They were a publicly traded company for a long time. And when they went private last year, they were 275 years old. They were the oldest listed company in the New York Stock Exchange. So the art market's been around forever, right? Like it's one of the oldest asset classes there is. So families, ultra wealthy families, have just been collecting for a very, very long time.
Very interesting. Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking your time here. I'm always curious to learn about new investments, and I always love just sharing ideas with my audience. And then if they want to research these things more themselves and find out, it's just a good way to find out about other options out there other than just, stocks and bonds and, what everyone else is focused on. And I also have been pushing myself to, again, explore more alternative investments myself. I've been making some venture capital or angel investments, and I plan on doing more of that in 2021. And yeah, I kind of, as you said as well, I'm just a little weary of the stock market myself, and I just kind of like the idea of getting in on something that maybe has less eyeballs on it, where you're getting hopefully more attractive valuations than what we're seeing with the stock market.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Scott. And I will talk to you guys in a little bit. So anyways, guys, there you have it. Thanks so much for watching this video and the interview. If you made it all the way to the end, please leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of this video. If you would like to check out Masterworks yourself and learn more about this investment opportunity, there will be a link down below where you can visit that website and get more information, or potentially become an investor yourself if you think this is a good fit for your overall portfolio. Thank you again, Masterworks, for sponsoring this video. I'd love to have you guys back on the channel sometime to talk again. And if you guys are new here, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell for future notifications, and I will see you in the next video.